Hello, and welcome to the academyofworship.org YouTube channel. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to be giving you 5 pro tips. These are going to be pro tips that are definitely going to set you above the rest of the pack. These are skills that if you have, or traits that if you have as a musician, are definitely going to get you noticed. So if you've ever wondered why that person gets a lot of the shows or gigs or parts and you don't, or maybe you're thinking, I need to get noticed in a really crowded field, maybe you play an instrument that there's lots of people doing it, these are for you. Let's get started. Tip number 1, be on time. There's no excuse for being late. If things are planned and you see that there's a call time or a load-in time or some other time designated for you to be there when they tell you to. There's a reason these things are scheduled this way. A lot of times there's musicians coming in before you, or production crews coming in before you, or people setting up, and you need to be there at a specific time to get what you need to get done. So if they're doing line checks, or maybe they're setting up the guitar stuff and the bass stuff is getting set up after you, or whatever, there's a plethora of things that could be going on. You need to be there on time. What happens if you don't show up on time? Well, you look bad, number 1, and that's not professional. Number 2, it makes the team look bad. You don't want that, because sometimes if you're being hired to do something, if you bring the whole team down, you're definitely not coming back. And the worst part is it sets everything back. So all time frames get pushed back, maybe the show even starts late, or the worship service, or whatever it is you have going on, and that never ends well. So the most pro thing you could do is be on time. So do it. Pro tip number 2, learn the part. If you're playing a cover song, which most of us are in this situation, whether it's in worship or otherwise, there's going to be probably a recorded version of the song. Listen to that version, learn your part. It can be a drum part, it can be a vocal part, it can be a guitar part, it can be a keyboard part, it could be a bass part, it could be whatever part. Learn it. Learn it the way it's recorded. Because 9 times out of 10, that's going to get you started in a really good place. So if you show up at rehearsal or wherever and you have that part dialed, you've made the worship leader or music director or whoever's life way easier, because they have one less thing to worry about. You're playing the right part. Now, that's not to say that parts can change, or that when you get into rehearsal, maybe someone decides, don't play that part exactly, do a hybrid version of that, and maybe the keyboard part if you're a guitar player, for instance. Lots of things can change, but if you start from the recorded part or the written part, you're in a good place. Pro tip number 3, come prepared. Bring the stuff you need. I know this seems obvious, but a lot of people don't bring the basic stuff you need. If you're a guitar player, have extra picks. Have an extra couple of cables, just in case one goes bad. Have extra strings. If one breaks and you have a break in the sets or something, you can change it and be right back in business. Bring another instrument if you have a secondary instrument, just in case, right in the middle of that song, you can swap the guitar or bass or whatever out. If you're a drummer, do you have extra drumsticks in case you break one? It's the forethought before you play and the preparation there as far as having the stuff you need that really comes in handy if something does go wrong. So just think ahead. Batteries, picks, strings, all those little tiny things are really important to have just in case. So come prepared. And you never know when you might be the hero if someone else has something go bad and they're not prepared. Believe me, the music director or worship director or whoever is going to notice the fact that, wow, this person really comes prepared and ready to go. That's awesome. So just have that bag of stuff ready. It's always a good idea. Pro tip number 4, play with confidence. Play out. One of the things I notice about amateur sounding musicians isn't that they don't put in the time to practice, or isn't that they don't know the part, it's they don't play it with confidence, or they don't play out. What I mean is, if you're a drummer, hit the drums like you mean it. You don't have to be animal and play as hard as you possibly can, but if you're timid, it shows and you can hear it. Even the sound people out front aren't going to like the way that your kit sounds if you're hitting it kind of timidly, because they're using compression and gating and all kinds of stuff out in front of house, and if you're not hitting them right, you're not making that stuff do what it needs to do. If you're a guitar player, if you're not striking your strings with confidence or playing the notes solid like you know what you're playing, it shows. You can hear it in your performance. Bass players, you're not hitting those notes hard and letting them sustain or knowing exactly where you're hitting, or maybe you're hitting too many notes. That can sound weak as well. So you have to find a happy balance. But the point is, play out and play with confidence. And going back to point number 2, if you learn the real part, you should have that confidence to know exactly what you're playing. And even if you have to alter it a little bit, or someone asks you to change something, make note of it and play it with confidence. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this with musicians. Even someone who's an amazing player, if it doesn't have confidence behind it or they're not playing out on their instrument, you hear it. So I'm just saying, make sure you do it. And pro tip number 5 is be flexible. Now, all kinds of things can change, from the practice space to the rehearsal with the band. So if you're at home practicing and you've learned the part, you're prepared, you've got all your stuff together, and you show up at rehearsal and the band leader says, we're changing it. That can scare even some of the more seasoned professionals out there. So I'm not saying don't be nervous if that happens. It's perfectly okay, but it's how you deal with it that counts. So if you have someone changing something on you last minute or something you weren't expecting to change, do your best to accommodate that person. So if you have a musical director or a worship leader or someone who's in charge changing something kind of last minute and unexpectedly, then do your best to roll with it, because I guarantee you, your willingness to change and to be flexible and to bring your skill to bear for that person is going to be something that sticks in their minds, and they're going to remember you for that. So be flexible and help others around you to be flexible. So if something changes that affects more than just your part, or maybe the way that you interacted with the keyboard before, talk with that other musician and work it out amongst yourselves. And part of being flexible is being able to communicate with the rest of the band. So if you were playing a part that maybe interacted with the keyboard part, or there's a rhythmic thing that's changing that the drums need to change with you, talk to them. Nothing's more pro than communicating with the musicians around you, coming to an understanding musically, and executing with excellence. Musical directors and worship directors are going to notice this stuff, and it goes a long way. Now, you may have some of these down, or you may already practice some of these, or maybe these are all brand new to you. Either way, I promise you, as someone who's done this for decades at this point, and if you talk to any other professional musician, whether they're worship musicians or otherwise, you're going to hear a lot of the same themes come up. So take those 5 pro tips, put them to use, and I promise you, you're not going to go wrong. Oh, and before we go, one last extra tip, number 6, that if you watch this far you get. Always have some paper and a pen or pencil at the ready, because you never know when you're going to need to write something down. Maybe the order and arrangement of a song changes, maybe the key has changed and you want to make some quick notes on what chords you're playing, whatever. It's always good to write down changes. If something is different than what you expected, if you don't write it down, you're going to forget it. So write it down. That looks professional. All professionals I know make notes. So do it. So there you go. Pro tip number 6 if you watched this long. That's pretty much it. I hope that was helpful. I hope you can bring all of these things to bear in your musical activities, and I hope ultimately this benefits the musical leader in your life, whether it's a worship leader or a musical director, whoever. I hope the team grows, and I hope you do well. So until next time, go twist some knobs, flip some switches, and I'll see you in the next one.